Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Love That Loves You Back, a podcast between myself, Valerie Kabov, and my dear friend Jonathan Freemantle. Uh, I'm an artistic miscreant, otherwise known as a self-described third-generation art professional, who's currently raising a fourth-generation art professional, uh, born in the depths of the Pale of Settlement in the former Soviet Union and
Mm.
partly raised in Australia, uh, lived and worked in London and Paris, and 15 years ago, uh, by a quirk of fate, relocated to Zimbabwe, where I'm the co-founder of First Floor Gallery Harare, trying to figure out life, education, art, and predominantly love of art as
Mm.
life goes on. And without further ado, over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Valerie. Yeah, Jonathan Freemantle. I grew up in Cape Town and studied in London. I did a long apprenticeship in fine art in the old sense, and have been more making art in one way or another ever since then. Um, I live in Edinburgh now, but I also lived for a while in Johannesburg where I had Hazard Gallery. And that was the context that I met Valerie about 10, 12 years ago, and just loved the conversation we had immediately about painting and how painting is everything. And that conversation's been a constant source of joy and sustenance over the years. So it does make sense that we share the conversation and look forward to where this goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it usually goes anywhere and everywhere, but somehow we always come back to art, and
Yeah,
because it is the love that loves us back. Thank you very
right.
much for joining us, and we look forward to sharing the journey. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of 2025. We're finishing the year with 4 questions from our respected and beloved audience. Some questions have been on the edge of the apocalyptic, and we share with you the trepidations and the dramas and the traumas of 2025. But we'll start with the easiest question so far, and it comes from H in Harare, saying, how does one do one's own openings? What is the best way to survive one's own openings? And over to you, Jonathan, as the artist in the room.
That's a lovely question. And it's actually one that I only started to be strategic about after having a string of quite traumatic experiences. You know, my first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever shows, there was this incredible build-up, excitement, the kind of blur of the opening. You almost feel like you're not there. And then that terrible feeling the next day, like you go back to a party and the balloons are deflated and they're on the floor, and how destructive that is for your own creative process. You have this terrible vacuum. And then, you know, with a month or two later, you sort of essentially have to start from zero. And what you want is that there's no starting from zero, there's no ending, there's just this continuous, wonderful sense of production, and that you're able to actually be there at the opening and experience it and see it, you know, learn from it, see your work in a way that you may not see in the studio, for example. I would say this might sound churlish because I don't always achieve it, but make sure the work is finished a month before the show. I know that gallerists would be pleased to hear that too. At least a month, you know, that's minimum. If you can do that, then you have that sense of ending before the opening night. So when you get to the opening night, you've sort of seen it. The work has left you. There's enough space between you and the work so that you can actually see it and enjoy the opening. The other thing I would say is when you deliver the work, and this is based on the idea that you've got a good gallery and a good curator, allow them to curate it. Let them hang it. Let them choose how the work is seen. Let them arrange it in ways that they feel is best and arrive at the opening with a sense of delight. Like, how will the work look? You know, you don't know. You haven't invested in that so that you have that lovely element of surprise. It's not sort of coming to something that you know. There's an element of it that you don't know. I had an experience this year where I sent 20 odd works to this gallery Messams in Cork Street, and I didn't know at all how they would hang the work and where they would hang it. And turning around the corner of the street and coming into the gallery, and I saw they'd hung it in a grid. And not just that it was in a grid, but that the way they had placed them was so delightful. And that fed me, in the opening. At the opening, don't feel like you need to see everyone and talk to everyone. Rather be in a kind of passive state. Don't be active. The gallery's job is being active. That's their chance to be active. If you can, just be passive. People will come to you, say things, listen to them. It's quite often the funny old man or lady or whatever in the corner who has something to say to you that is more important than this fat cat collector that wants to hog your time. So be there to listen to those, because tomorrow, the day after the show, that's what will feed you. That wonderful pearl of something. Someone's seen something in your work that's illuminating and delightful. And then don't go to the gallery the next day. Avoid the gallery. Don't go maybe for a week. Just leave it alone. Let the gallery do what they do. If you have to go back for a talk or an interview, that's wonderful. But don't go there when the balloons are on the floor and the streamers have been burst. Just avoid it. Take a couple of days to not see that work. Go to the beach, read a book, draw. Work from that little thread that maybe that old man or old lady or the little. Sometimes I've had experiences where it's like a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old will say something about my painting at the opening, and I'll think, wow, that was interesting. And if possible, I really cracked it at a show in Johannesburg where I made sure that I said to about 6 people at the opening, I want you to come with me tomorrow to have lunch. And there was some kind of celebration, family gathering, because I knew I'd be vulnerable that day. I wasn't trying to be tough. I knew that that day would be a day that I needed people to just not talk about art, just have a nice lunch. That's the best advice I could give, I think. And all that advice isn't really about how do you be successful at an opening. It's more about what happens to you the day after and the week after and the month after. How is it that you can continue that beautiful thing that happened, which is arbitrary, really? It's a thing about selling. And there's something about storytelling, which is amazing. But ideally, you just want to keep going. And for me, that works.
That's a beautiful answer. I don't really have much to add, apart from saying is that sometimes I think for the artist, seeing the work in the space, that is the bigger moment
Yeah.
than the actual event, because it's that time and
Mm.
space when you can be with the work, probably for the last time as a body of work
Yes.
altogether, and just experience it as it was meant to be, and it
Mm.
has the time and the potential to surprise you. And I've seen that
Mm.
happen where the
Mm.
artist has not anticipated how good their work actually
Yeah.
is. And that's just a very beautiful moment to have with the artist, or to experience that you actually didn't know how good you are. And that's
Mm.
beautiful. But it actually leads us neatly, I guess, into the next question is, how do artists manage, or especially young artists manage success, right?
Yeah.
Because this is one of those things, is that you go from an opening when you're celebrated. I'll take this one
Mm.
because that's constantly on the agenda at the
Mm.
gallery. How do you survive success? I was speaking about this with somebody, and it's really about managing ego. Like, as much as in the art world, we need a robust ego to engage with the industry, right? Or for self-esteem, really. But ego is the hugest obstacle
Yeah.
to career development. And so what happens is success often goes to the head, and it's kind of intended to. Visual artists are not potentially as vulnerable as musicians because they face that kind of repeated kind of dopamine hit every time they step on stage, whereas an artist only does it like maybe once a year or twice a year at an exhibition opening, right? Whereas a musician has to deal with that high and low all the time. So we're much better off in the art world in terms of
Mm.
not being, bombarded by this thing. But for me, managing success is also recognizing that it's not about you, and also communicating to the artist that you're really in an industry where There are absolutely no guarantees. You do not have a job, that you're there for the long run, and that the work is the only thing that will sustain you. Being celebrated one moment doesn't mean that you won't be pilloried the next, for whatever. That's the world we live in. So your own talent and responsibility to your talent rather than yourself is what will
Yeah.
carry the momentum for you. And you should see your career as your life's work.
Mm.
Having said that, I see a lot of artists, and comparison is the thief of joy. But what I find is that it's somehow easier for artists of middling talent to succeed in terms of career because they don't have illusions
Mm.
about or have grand ambitions of achieving Mount Everest, and they just take the wins where they can and they
Mm.
make hay while the sun shines. Whereas a lot of profoundly gifted artists who have a grand vision struggle with the weight of their personal ambition for themselves, and they find making good on common sense life decisions a lot more harder than those of middling talent. And then they are very often thrust into, especially we're in an Instagram world where you see somebody who's profoundly average, but a nice guy, a nice
Mm.
person who has, decided to play nice and play the game. And I don't judge anyone for earning a living at all. I just think, bravo, congratulations, because we know that your work will not contribute to the
Mm.
grander vision of art history, but at the same time, being a peer who's got greater talent and ambition, you're always, you will struggle, right?
Yeah.
So, A, don't compare yourself to anyone else. That's rule number one for absolutely everyone. Think of your career as a 70-year project
Yeah.
rather than a 5-year project or a 10-year project, and see you were given a talent and you're responsible to the talent. You are not the author of your talent. You have a gift and you have a responsibility to nurture and develop that
Yes.
gift. That is your primary job. But yeah, and
Mm.
don't chase girls too much.
I would add just one thing to that, that certainly when I was younger, and I would say still now, the biggest factor in helping me through these kind of micro disappointments or senses that I'm not where I should be, and is being in the company of artists in their 80s and 90s who have this incredible vision of a career. They're looking at whatever you're doing as a part in a big picture. And just being around them unlocks that kind of wide vision that you're talking about. This idea that your work is one big work, not if I don't have a sellout again this year, or if I do have a sellout, what do I do next? You know, the famous second album problem, all that stuff. I would say sit with the elders.
No, that is a brilliant suggestion. I like absolutely salute you. That is 100% on the money. And I guess in some ways it brings us into the third question. Aren't we really, really good with this? We're fabulous. Always manage to congratulate yourself if you can.
Mr. A in Edinburgh.
He was asking what is the value or the merits of prizes in the art world?
My certainty is that the kind of whole realm of prize giving in art is problematic. This sort of best painting of the year, it's flawed, you know. And then if you add that into the kind of echo chamber of where we are, you know, in terms of politics and identity politics and the struggle to put a marker on what's excellent and what's not excellent, and actually the question whether that's even valuable. So for those people who are frustrated with why should they win, they're not the best, you know, that was just a token prize. And I think your question is maybe also invalid. I would hope that we're going to not have that whole context in the next chapter of our art life. I mean, there used to be competitions in the sense of which artist got the commissions from the Duke or the King, or, you know, I suppose there was. I remember that lovely story of Prince Philip or King Philip in Spain, who wanted the new court painter, and he sent his people out to all of the artists in the land saying, send me your best work. And they all knew that Goya was the best. And they went to Goya's studio and he said, I'm not going to submit anything. I mean, I don't believe in competitions. That's bullshit. And so that came back to the king, and he said, no, 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 you have to get something because he's going to win it. So, but he can't win it unless he submits something. And so he drew a perfect circle and he said, take that with a free hand. And he won the competition. And I think there's a lot in that. It's kind of pointless.
My position is kind of multi-layered in a sense that prizes become a form of social philanthropy, right? So
Yeah.
anytime an artist gets some money, great. We live
Yeah.
in an attention economy, so you treat it as just another opportunity of getting attention, but you should never treat it as some kind of validation of your practice. That would
Mm.
be ridiculous, right?
Yes.
So I'd say go ahead, win a prize. They pay for a trip somewhere. Fabulous. Make the most of the opportunity that it affords you in terms of attention, engagement, and an ability to meet people that are interesting to you, travel to places that can be enjoyable, educational. So use the
Mm.
positive elements of that, but for God's sake, never, ever, ever think that
Mm.
that actually makes you somebody. And so again,
Yes.
goes back to the idea of ego, does because that prize will then become an obstacle
Yes.
in your own career and practice development. Like that's
Mm.
the easiest way to do
Mm.
that. And then it goes back to how to survive success and all those
Mm.
things. It just goes back to no, just don't treat it as anything that. We're all very lucky if we even warrant ourselves an ability to be a footnote in history. You
Yeah.
know, if you just make it to a footnote, you're already achieving so much more than
Mm.
almost everyone else. It's brilliant. But I also say that in a painting, if you make a painting that can impact someone's life, even if
Mm.
it's one, you've already
Yeah.
achieved tremendously. And isn't that the whole point? Is
Yeah.
that you're able to connect to people? When I look at the value of prizes, they're
Mm.
just bullshit in terms of
Yeah.
sums. You'd be surprised how many prizes are like $5,000. What the hell is that?
Even
For some
top
people, that's not
prizes.
even studio rent.
Yeah.
So I find that kind of offensive is
Mm.
how cheap a lot of the prizes are. Like I grew up in Australia and they had the Archibald Prize, which was
Mm.
$100,000 20, 30 years ago. It was always $100,000. Now,
Mm.
30 years ago, that was a life-changing amount of money. At the time, if you got $100,000, that would be almost 50% value of a real, like of a house,
Yeah.
right? Now that's barely a deposit. And a lot of sponsors who celebrate themselves, and then they terrorize the artist with questions, how is this going to change your life? When in fact, I'm like, you've given me fuck all money. What do you think? You know, it's not going to cover my materials for the year. So you're asking me to kiss ass for doing fuck all for me. So I'm going to enjoy the attention economy, but the prize givers should be humble about their
Mm.
ability to do anything for the
Yeah.
artist. And I'm
Mm.
just going to use this as a really weird opportunity to weigh in on something that is quasi prizes and the micro controversy that is raging right now about Alma Allen, the artist selected for the US Venice Biennale
Mm.
Pavilion, the pathetic self-righteousness of art galleries who ditched him for accepting the pavilion, saying how because this was endorsing some kind of a Trumpian
Mm.
politics and judging the artist ahead of him even making the work. So it's a kind of self-righteous censorship that
Yeah.
comes from saying, well, if you don't play ball with our ideology, you know, whether or not you are in fact doing that, being judged as like guilty and then having to prove your innocence, and also expecting art to be entirely in conformity to a certain political zeitgeist is just dramatically pathetic. So you have these
Yeah.
things, but it also shows that Venice has completely collapsed as a vehicle for anything else. And we will talk about it next year. So this is the final question.
Will 2026 be any better? The best way to answer it would be to look sort of within my own inner psychological makeup. I've been looking at it a fair amount over the last 2 weeks on holiday. Like, what was 2025? What happened? It felt like a lot happened, but a lot was kind of unresolved. The things that worked almost felt like kind of byproducts of a bigger thing that felt momentously difficult, like a sort of Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill kind of experience. And I know a lot of people have had that feeling that there was this huge, I mean, putting aside all of the global chaos, and how that's affected more or less everyone in one way or another. The kind of cosmic energy has been difficult. There's been a lot of work needed just to stay afloat. And looking back at the year and how those micro, it's almost like here's a desert. What grew? And the things that grew were these byproducts and these sort of extra, almost like crumbs from the table, things that you didn't intend. And I am certain I can see it, and I know you will echo this, that in the art world and beyond the art world, the seeds that have been planted in this quite arid time will 100% start growing in the next year. And I feel like the next year there's an openness, there's a kind of sense that people are ready to come back to life. There's a feeling that the possibility of making works that you hope to make in 2025, those will be possible in 2026. There's a kind of sense of optimism, which is not kind of false optimism. It's genuine, hard-won, gentle, personal optimism. So my prognosis is good. I think people are ready to come back into the light and work together. I don't think it's going to be all easy, but I think having rolled that rock up the mountain and rolled it up again and rolled it up again so many times, there's some strength and some authentic kind of inner energy, and people will feel better. That's my hope and belief.
The one thing that I feel about 2025 is that it really dissolved any notion that we are in control of anything that happens, right? And what do you do with that idea, right? Especially in the art world, where all of the systems that we've used even to plan our years and understand how things work, especially for somebody like myself who works within the core of the infrastructure, right? Where your year is fairly well planned out
Mm.
and you're used to a predictable cycle of things. All of that has been dismantled on so many levels. I feel like you're standing sometimes in the ruins of something. Well, how do you pause the chaos is the question, right?
Mm.
And I think leave the chaos outside.
Yeah.
And then at that moment where you don't know anything, where you can't predict anything, the only thing that you can predict is who you are going to
Mm.
be and what you are here to do. I think is really amazing because it crystallizes all of the important things, because
Mm.
those are the only things that you should be doing anyway. And then the things that you were expecting or thought you had control of are actually not the important things. So the work is the thing. I am the eternal optimist for no apparent reason, but one of the things that I'm going to challenge myself for next year is just to do things that are scary. You know,
Yeah.
they say if it scares you a little, it's
Mm.
probably worth doing, because
Mm.
that's how you know you're dreaming big or dreaming
Mm.
towards something worth achieving,
Yeah.
right? And letting go of the idea of the expected and just being sensitive to the world the way it is. And I think it's somehow, a little bit scary
Mm.
because we're all sort of challenged to be incredibly adaptable
Yeah.
and fluid and
Mm.
flexible. But we're in the best possible position to do that because we're in an industry where we get to invent our own lives every single day. And we, over the last couple of decades, we got used to the idea that this is, in fact, some kind of an industry, some kind of a shop,
Mm.
some kind of, a solid structure. Whereas, in fact, that was superficial. What is true is our own personal freedom
Yeah.
and an ability to invent ourselves in the way that we want to and we need
Yes.
to, and to share that sense of freedom with
Yeah.
the rest of the world. So all liberations are a little bit traumatic, but that's how I feel about it. So we wish everybody a happy new year. We look forward to sharing more with you. We're always open to questions. We've enjoyed answering these guys. It's fun.
I loved what you said about doing the difficult or scary thing. That's something that I'll carry into the next year. I think that's the mission statement. It's so cool to hear you say that. And it's been wonderful to have had this conversation with you and just an unfolding joy to discover new things and learn from you and learn from this discussion. And I'm very grateful that you initiated it and look forward to carrying it on.